Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. When the Republic fell and turned into the Empire overnight, daily life didn't change all that much for most people in the galaxy. If your Outer Rim homestead was in ruins because of the Clone Wars, it was probably still in ruins as Palpatine danced on the graves of his Jedi enemies. If you were rich and living the high life in the upper levels of Coruscant, things were still great and your problems were mostly trivial as you watched Masamita conduct a lightsaber burning ceremony on the steps of the Jedi Temple. And if you lived in the lower levels of the Coruscant, well, you might not have even known about the Clone Wars, let alone the fall of the Republic and the rise of the Empire. Neither sun nor news from the surface can find its way through all those cracks and crevices. So what made the Empire so different from the Republic? Well, today we're going to take a look at 5 major policy moves that Palpatine implemented in the first year of the Empire. Many of these decisions and policies were actually building on things that Palpatine pushed for during the Clone Wars in the last years of the Republic, and they would greatly change how the galaxy was run. When we think about the Galactic Empire's effect on the civilian population, we usually picture stormtroopers kicking down doors and pregnant alien women in the stomach. These things happened, of course, but how did the stormtroopers get called in for their stomach-kicking appointment in the first place? Well, you had the local police, and you had the Imperial Security Bureau who watched the population closely, but they were all controlled by a massive organization known as Koppnor, or the Commission for the Preservation of the New Order. This was an all-encompassing government agency that was in charge of all internal affairs within the Galactic Empire. Now, in a non-autocratic government, such organizations would have been split up into many different bureaus, but Palpatine liked large government and complete control over the populace. On top of that, individuals who worked in Koppnor were extremely devoted to him individually. It was almost like a mass populist movement as well as a bureaucratic entity. This is where Palpatine's political base was located. Now, Koppnor was heavily involved with creating the image of the perfect imperial citizen and dictating what imperial culture was through massive propaganda campaigns and rallies. Although Koppnor was not technically a political party or her belief system, its members were mainly responsible for keeping other imperial citizens in check when they weren't on duty. In this way, members of Koppnor were not that different from Nazi Party members or Chinese Communist Party members, who perpetrated some of the worst crimes dictated by their own autocratic leaders. Now, Koppnor also carried out a campaign to increase public support for the government and military, and also drummed up fear and xenophobia against aliens living in the Empire. At the same time, the organization also played up humanity's role in the galaxy and its superiority to other species through supporting specific works of art and literature. Koppnor made sure that no matter how terrible things were in the Empire, the civilian support for the Emperor would not wane. The biggest visual change that occurs during the rise of the New Order takes place on Coruscant, the famed Senate district, home of the Galactic Senate, and much of the Republic's bureaucratic offices became known as the Federal District. The Galactic Senate would continue to serve as a rubber stamp Congress for a few more years, but the true center of power would be located at the Imperial Palace, which of course was built on the ruins of the Jedi Temple. Palpatine followed the classic tactic of taking your enemy's main place of worship and power and then transforming it into his own center of power and belief system. Once the Jedi were all kicked out and massacred and their treasure either destroyed or cataloged for the Emperor's own enjoyment, the Jedi Temple was completely gutted and turned into a massive and empty hall in which the Emperor would hold court for his subjects and foreign dignitaries. The Jedi Temple also was reportedly built on top of an ancient Sith shrine, which itself was built on top of a Force nexus that it had corrupted deeply. Emperor Palpatine would spend many nights down in this ancient Sith shrine, meditating and trying to figure out what his next move would be. At the center of the Empire's massive military-industrial complex, federal military and civil service branches was its Imperial Academy system. In my opinion, it's one of the best things that Palpatine's government accomplished in his earlier years. Prior to the Empire's rise, the Republic's federal government was relatively small. Most people in the galaxy were employed at the local level, and so mid-rim and core worlds with developed economies had high rates of employment. But in sparsely populated outer rim territories, the lack of development led to higher amounts of poverty and unemployment. The Imperial Academy system standardized the existing Republic education system and created a pipeline for skilled and talented individuals from all across the galaxy to join the Galactic Empire. This gave individuals who otherwise would have had no prospects, like Luke Skywalker, a way off of their backwards planet. The Empire utilized all of this untapped manpower and resources and gave purpose to billions of people who were left behind by the Republic. Now, this system wasn't perfect. Of course, corruption and personal interests often meant that core world applicants had higher chances of attending prestigious schools, but still, there were resources flowing into parts of the galaxy that had been neglected for centuries. The Imperial Academy system also had a culture of ruthless competition, and it was very effective at finding the most talented pilots and officers to fill in positions within the Galactic Empire military. The Rebel Alliance might have had better snub fighters, but their pilots were trash compared to the Empire's finest TIE fighter pilots. The Empire wasn't just about propaganda and militarization, it was also about complete control of its civilian populace. Individuals who become dictators often fear and distrust their own populace, which is why chain codes were created by Emperor Palpatine in order to keep track of everyone in the galaxy. During one of the first episodes of The Bad Batch, when Clone Force 99 finds refuge on the world of Salakamai, they notice that the Galactic Empire is signing up everyone for chain codes. This is sort of like the equivalent of a driver's license or social security number. The chain code had all sorts of biographical data on it, like your age, your height, your physical appearance, and so on. This would all be placed in a central Imperial database and made it very easy for the Empire to track you. Decades later, we would see chain codes be used as main identifiers for bounty hunters. Just one example of how giving your information to others can go wrong. Now, during the same scene on Salakamai, we also see that the Galactic Empire is offering to exchange People's Galactic Republic credits for the new Galactic Empire credits. One of the major steps Palpatine took at the end of the Republic era to solidify control was the nationalization of the galactic banking system. This allowed the Republic and the Empire later on to basically print its own currency. This was an extremely important thing because the Republic's tax structure was never designed to support a massive military force. And as the Clone Wars dragged on into its third year, the Republic was on the verge of bankruptcy. For the Empire to continue expanding its military force and navy, it required even more credits. Palpatine managed this by nationalizing many industries and resources, but also by printing a huge amount of credits from his own federal banking system. For all of you future dictators out there, no matter what your ideology or political system is going to be, when you create your own little fiefdom, you gotta make sure you're in control of the capital before you control everything else. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.